kind of entered the age of Bacillus. Bacillus are very effective at controlling Clostridial diseases, so we saw a huge influx of that. In fact, today it's expected that 75% or better of the U.S. broiler industry is being fed some Bacillus in some part of their diet. So that's an amazing amount of change that's happened in the last really 10 years.
Welcome to the Poultry Podcast Show. I am your host, Dr. Elizabeth Bobeck, and today I'm here with Tom Rehberger. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited to hear about some of the aspects of microbiology and the microbiome, which is your expertise or one of the areas. But first, I want to hear, how did you get into poultry?
Well, we actually came to poultry by way of our company, AgTech Products, originally that we started after I left the university. So in 1993, we started a company. And of course, being in Wisconsin, it was more about dairy and dairy things. But it was an interesting process that we got into poultry because poultry, basically, life cycles are so short. So as a researcher, I love the idea that in 42 days, I can reset and try again. And right away, we said, look at the size of this industry. Obviously, from a commercial standpoint, it's a huge opportunity. 9 billion U.S. broilers produced every year. There's a great opportunity. We were in and around the turkey industry as well, so we had some good connections there. So really, that's what kind of swept us into poultry. And this week in particular, it's kind of interesting because I'm missing the Midwest Poultry Conference, which is traditionally in St. Paul, Minnesota. So this is... I'm doing this instead. But it's become a very happy industry, great technology, early adapting technology companies, and also early adapting production companies. So it's exciting from that perspective. It's a great industry to be part of.
Yeah, poultry is pretty dynamic. They're pretty responsive to consumer wants, needs, cares, all those things. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look what they did in terms of changing the antibiotic use, right? The first RWA technology comes along and they say, this is something we can do. And it's great to see.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in your current position?
Yep. So coming out of retirement, this is we call fourth wave. So this is our fourth time. So this is now starting another company called we actually have two companies, one with a professor at University of Wisconsin, and there it's called Agro BioSciences, and there we're developing model systems to actually look at the gastrointestinal microbiome and how we can use it as a tool to assess health or dysbiosis. And so we're trying to do that on a very small scale, and it's called under the oil technology. So you can get these very, very small droplets, and you can measure things in microfluidics style. So that's the new area we're working on the test side. And then more on the commercial or product side, hopefully that technology works, and then we'll license it into our other company, which is Bioactive Innovations. And here we're looking at new generation of probiotics, new generation of combination products, bioactive. That's the term we like because there's a lot more than just probiotics that need to come help poultry producers every day.
Yeah. So what can you tell us about kind of the current thoughts or your company's vision for probiotics and the microbiome in poultry?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting time because I think the science is advancing at such a great rate. We're starting to understand how these organisms really do their work. And I would argue that, we started generationally with lactic acid bacteria. That was the first thing as a probiotic. It made sense. Oftentimes in the industry, these were like yogurt cultures. In fact, one of the famous nutritionists, he's a veterinarian, often teased me and said, yogurt boy is what he'd call me. Because the idea was I was trying to talk to him about cultures and how they could be effective for increasing performance and decreasing disease. So we went from that to a really understanding of Bacillus. Bacillus are great because they're stable forms of bacteria that are sporeformers. So therefore, we can get them in normal feed distribution. We don't have to worry about that. Now, we can't necessarily heat the feed, but we're to the point where we sterilize it and kill the bacteria. But for most feed, we're not going to have a problem with the stability of the Bacillus. So kind of entered the age of Bacillus. Bacillus are very effective at controlling Clostridial diseases. So we saw a huge influx of that. In fact, today it's expected that 75% or better of the U.S. broiler industry is being fed some Bacillus in some part of their diet. So that's an amazing amount of change that's happened in the last really 10 years. So we see this as now a chance to go beyond that and really understand how Bacillus play, how probiotics play in the microbiome, and then how we can get them to express different things. We're also moving into an age where genetic engineering can do a lot of good things. And as we adopt that technology into the food industry, as it is being adopted more and more in the food industry, we will have a chance to look at unique ways that we can actually respond to challenges that are very growth specific and very age specific for a bird and so forth. So really you have to kind of think about this differently. It's not feeding every bird every day, but really moving to what's appropriate for the challenge of the stage of production that bird is in. And that's really where we want to go.
Natural Biologics is using cutting-edge science to dig deeper into the poultry health challenges you face. By gathering scientific evidence, they identify the most effective combinations of natural ingredients that improve animal health. Visit naturalbiologics.com/poultry to see the newest research in both turkeys and chickens.
Yeah, so you're thinking maybe dosing or changes in precision nutrition based on upcoming challenges.
Exactly. So in the first stage of life, it's all about developing an innate, and the innate immune system is there. Can we get it to work the way we want? And as we look at the adaptive or acquired immune system, can we stimulate it at the right level at the right time? Overstimulation of the active immune system, of course, decreases energy efficiency, starts to cause some problems with the bird. Inflammation in general starts to get the bird to not intake as the optimal amount of feed, and suddenly we'll have a little pause. Day 7 mortality is the lowest it's ever been. Obviously, a lot of people point to that it's not conventional production anymore. It's not using subtherapeutic antibiotics. I think there's more to it than just that. And I think it's really a matter of trying to understand what that young chick gut looks like. What does it look like in the beginning as an egg? You and I were talking about that just a minute ago because you have one of the important papers in that area identifying gastrointestinal microbiome. Where does it come from? It comes from the environment. It comes from the egg, things like that. So we have to understand that continuity from the canal. Birds are probably one of the only livestock species where we've taken mom and offspring and completely separated them and decided that sterility is the healthier way to life. And it's completely, I think, an incorrect model. So I think we're going to change that by looking at ways to stimulate both the innate and the acquired immune system in early life, get that bird on the right track, and then it can fight its own battles every day.
So what do you think about either combinations or, use of multiple species within, the same Bacillus, for example, but maybe different types within there, or dosing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bacillus aren't Bacillus, right? Every strain is different. I would argue that we worked with a guy, Dr. Rehberger, back at was the turkey store before it was Jenny O, and he was actually teaching us about a disease that was actually a Clostridial-based disease. Back then it was called cellulitis. Today we'd probably call it something else, but it's still Clostridial-based disease. It's Clostridium septicum, it's Clostridium perfringens, and he was saying, I'm losing probably 30% of my flock, late stage production. These birds are normal, and all of a sudden they drop, they're dead. And all of a sudden, so we said, what can we do? How can we look? So we looked at it from a biology perspective, isolated those pathogens, got an understanding, and then realized broad spectrum antimicrobial producing bacillus are one way out of this problem. But the challenge is that it's probably not the only way, and it's probably not the best way, because what you've done is throw at the microbiome a bug that can produce probably anywhere from 10 to 15 antimicrobials that are either polyketide or lipoprotein based, big antimicrobial structures that are going in there and just decimating the microbiome. Yeah. Along the way, they're going to take out Clostridium, but they're probably going to take out some beneficial organisms too. And we're going to see that probably if we had kept that bird around. But in this particular case, because it was late stage poultry or turkey production, we're able to get by with that concept. And I think that's what we saw the industry, late 80s, early 90s, and then throughout, the late 90s even, everybody was just saying, my bacillus produces more antimicrobial than your bacillus. And it is the wrong approach. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, we were lucky to run into a couple of partners that did great work with us. Wen Lillehoy from the USDA, we partnered with Wen and learned a lot about what else does Bacillus do. And from understanding of that, today we understand that it's probably the more beneficial effect of Bacillus is more about tight junction proteins. How can we get the expression of those proteins to increase that barrier function? And if we can do that in a young bird, we can stop the infiltration of those pathogens, those toxins, and really change that health status of that young bird. So day 7 mortality, here we go. That's what we're starting to look at, or have been looking at.
So what do you think about, the overall community structure in birds? I see that there are some lactobacillus bacteria, for example, that do, they may have some benefit, but there's already so much lactobacillus there in
Lactobacillus are certainly a critical part of that microbiome, that balance in the microbiome, right? And we know more and more about that. In fact, I would argue that as people got into the bacillus commercial, development of probiotics, what they did was forget about lactic acid bacteria, particularly in a young bird. Feeding a bacillus that can have oftentimes pro-inflammatory activity in a young bird is probably the wrong idea. But yet lactic acid bacteria are known to be more homeostasis in that early stages. So we believe it's really that combination that you have to look at. And again, that's why you got to get rid of that idea, every bird, every day. Let's look at what that bird needs, what that nutrition program is, maybe what even the COXI program is, and then how can we fit within that program and really try and understand what works best in terms of the whole picture for that bird.
Yeah. So what do you think about the delivery method for probiotics? I could assume, or maybe just extrapolate, that a nutritionist does not want to reformulate several times, in a 2-week period.
Yes.
So is this something that you could modify just by using a water-based probiotic, or do you think there's more benefit in the feed?
Absolutely. I still believe that feed is the best route because you can get more uniformity in terms of delivery.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that we always have with water systems is, and I always do this when I go visit houses, I take a white Dixie cup, go to the end of the line, pull it so I can get water, and ask the producer, would you drink this? Oftentimes you see chunks of biofilm, you see some other nasty stuff. That's the challenge of a water delivery system, unless we're really starting to maintain our water systems. And I think everybody is, by the way. I think, if you just look in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been tremendous, first of all, development of products in that space, better water sources, on-site proportioners that are doing the right thing to maintain water in a certain quality for the bird. So I think that's also improving. So it does make water-soluble delivery an option. And I think you have to look at it holistically and say, can this farm, with this condition that they have, deliver successfully a live organism to these birds using a water system? The feed is easy. And then there are some, applicator systems within feed that actually drop into a feed channel as opposed to go in through. So I think that's another opportunity for producers. Now, does that mean labor? Yeah, it does, because somebody has to remember to put that package into that Gandy applicator or whatever the system is to go into the feed line. It's also going on topically then. It's not incorporated into as much, but it's okay. In the end, you try and get the widest delivery, most acceptable as possible. But I think that is a challenge. I think you're right. Any of these technologies, that's going to be a challenge. How can we get these, if you get all the research to get the right bugs, and then you fail at the very simplest level, it's so frustrating. And that's sometimes what you have to really work on, is that practical application does make a big difference.
Yeah. So one of the things that is always interesting to me is that there seem to be some probiotics that are sort of better, like you said, more regulatory. They're better at preventing. And then there are some that are more reaction. Like, I have this problem. Would this specific probiotic help? Do you kind of have any ideas of like general categories of probiotics that might fit that bill? Or is it just location dependent as far as efficacy goes?
I think what you're seeing is, obviously there's the ones that are more about animal health and disease.
Right.
One of the more unique ones that I've seen is, and I think it was kind of from a problem of pododermatitis. So when litter gets sticky and wet, you actually get contact. That contact can cause a scalding on the foot, and that can cause pododermatitis. And we've seen probiotics that actually have been delivered through water systems to actually get into the bird and then be delivered through the gastrointestinal droppings onto the litter to decrease litter water activity and reduce the stickiness of litter. So there's a good example of something that was kind of made for one application and then used the delivery route of a probiotic to be more importantly and easy for the farmer and producer to distribute. But I do think you're right. There's different things for different targets. Are we thinking about health and disease? Are we thinking about wellness or sustainability? Are we thinking about lowering ammonia, lowering pododermatitis? Is this an environmental issue within the house? What is it? And then how does that make sense on what we're doing?
So what do you think about some of the combinations? I mean, there are some probiotics that have pre and pro. Some also contain yeast. Some are now stepping into organic acid. So what do you think about those? Is it a good thing, or is it like, ooh, just because you have one thing doesn't mean you add more to it?
Well, I think that we call that stacked technologies. There's I think it is, because it's hard to envision, even though I'm biased as a microbiologist and say bugs are the way to go. I know that there's active molecules that are produced through other means, be it essential oils, be it other compounds, enzymes, for instance. And if we can bring those into a product to actually have a multifunctional effect, particularly if we understand more targeted what we're actually approaching, that makes total sense. For a young bird, we know we might want some disease mitigation. Avian pathogenic E. coli is an early colonizer of the gastrointestinal tract. And the more we understand about those organisms within that and how quickly they can pass these pathogenic markers around, we need to control those. But at the same time, putting a bacillus that could cause a LPS challenge, because as we destroy or kill those E. coli, bits of that cell wall come out. And of course, the bird responds pretty proactively with an LPS challenge. So maybe we want to put in an anti-inflammatory regulatory lactic acid bacteria product that has an effect on toll-like receptors and be able to cover those so that we don't get a strong immune response. And so I do think that's the kind of thing that we see. We're real excited to see polyphenols entering the market now. They've been around a little bit, but now as they understand more and more of what these molecules can do, not only slowing down peristalsis, but also having a binding effect on certain toxins, have other nutrient benefits, some of these other polyphenols, grape extracts and what have you. So I think there's some really interesting things that are coming along that make sense to stack these technologies and really get the best from every one of them, not overreaching, but rather targeting the age or problem or challenge that bird will have, given it's in the brood phase, it's in the grow finish phase, or it's in late finishing.
So in your, ideal world, if you could change the management of everything from the hen laying the egg through the life of the bird, would you be moving towards maybe less egg washing, less, more interaction with litter or something, when the chick hatches, and then be moving on to some other probiotic sort of system as they go through? Like, what's your ideal?
Yeah, no, you just hit on a lot of cool stuff. So one of them is just that. I mean, I would probably start first by saying, let's talk about what's realistic and what's best in terms of mitigating a potential pathogen or an organism that can cause popped eggs or whatever, Pseudomonas. And let's figure out another way to do that besides using formaldehyde or broad spectrum disinfectants, because what they do is that they do kill the biome, the natural biome that is on that egg that needs to get in and begin that process of populating that early gastrointestinal tract. Yeah. If you look at the data, we've published this, and I know other groups have done the same. Early gastrointestinal health of a bird that at placement shows that about 80% of the birds are already colonized with avian pathogenic E. coli. And that means it's a difficult day, which also from a technology standpoint, that means that anything worth putting in the gastrointestinal tract, it's too late. The insult has happened. The bug is now systemically infected. And now you're going to have to deal with that performance impact through the life of that bird. Yeah. So, So that's why I would argue that one of the best things you should start to do is start to look at a program that understands that from an early stage of development. How can we get the best microbiome in the birds as possible? And then start that, because start makes such a difference.
Yeah.
We have great metrics to understand. Day 7 mortality is a huge thing, and people focus on that. But even though we are doing that, and we're doing things back behind the scenes, don't get me wrong, but I think the approach has been too much sterile, as opposed to let's start mitigating or improving mitigating disease and improving gastrointestinal balance by looking at early gastrointestinal health and what is the best thing to do there. It could be that it would be a probiotic. It could be that it would be a postbiotic. It could be a lot of different things. And I do think all that technology is there. It's just a matter of all the companies don't sell all of it. And so oftentimes you don't find the bridge. And to be honest, if I'm that poultry producer sitting across the desk, there's so much that coming at that person every day in new technologies, new ways. Everybody is going to improve your feed conversion by whatever percent. It's a tough day for them because they have to sort out not only their program, but then what technology is going to work best in my program. It's a tremendous challenge for them every day.
Yeah, I don't envy anyone who's getting attacked by people showing them products. Yeah. So it's a lot to weed through.
It's a lot to weed through. And I think that's the key thing, that you have to really understand that comprehensive nature of what's going to possibly work with the understanding. And then obviously for a poultry company, you do the test, right?
Yeah.
You have to do it in your system. We understand that. Do the test, get the right work done to help understand. And maybe through that process, you're going to find your next solution for your company might be, product A and product B, or product B and C, or whatever. It could be completely different.
So what do you think about the efficacy of probiotics that, half the birds are raised, no antibiotics ever, as part of a coccidiosis and necrotic enteritis control program? Because that's the big, looming issue that we have to solve or reduce the impact in most broiler houses.
Yeah, I think that probiotics can only go so far. I mean, we've already proven that, right? I mean, we see that every day. Is it that you'll have no flocks break if you're on the best probiotic? Probably it's Bacillus, probably it's broad spectrum antimicrobial, probably it's targeting Clostridium. We had a program that was called, Microbial Terroir, in which we actually went to every farm, every site within a production unit, generally a feed mill or a hatchery, and then said, okay, what does the pathogenic challenges look like? Using rapid high throughput microbiology genetic analysis, we could actually say, here's the range of diversity of those pathogens, and then target the biggest group. Great solution. But that was, again, taking the approach, kill everything and we'll win the game. And I think that's probably not the best way to do it today, particularly because there's a lot better ways to take that approach. Targeted specific. I mean, today it's going to be interesting in the next 5 years. There's already some technology coming targeting specific species of challenge organisms. Necrotic enteritis, actually Clostridium perfringens, but not just perfringens, but it's alpha toxin producing and is net B. The net B is so critical to those big outbreaks that we see. So, I mean, those kind of toxins, those kind of producers need to be controlled. How can we do that best, but at the same time maintain a harmony within that gastrointestinal tract? Because, ending up trying to kill a pathogen and causing more dysbiosis is not the solution either.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really interesting point that, the farmer can't just think of themselves as it's their location. It's not just their poultry house. It's the entire ecological environment. I mean, it's the feed mill. It's wherever else, people that work on his facility are going. So it's never just isolated. It's a lot more space.
And that's why we like that word terroir, because terroir was an inclusive word that really meant, of that nature, of the location, of that, it's the water, it's the litter. And you talked about litter, touch on that briefly. Litter is such a critical thing, and we've kind of ignored it. I think, composting, windrowing all make a huge difference. If we can drop 2 to 3 logs or even more in our load of litter before we place that next flock, that's a huge advantage. The problem is, close out and repop is not enough time. So that open window, if it's too short, we can't get the job done.
So what are your thoughts on the role of, the litter itself? Does using probiotics affect the next generation of birds in a positive way, and then the interaction with composting and just litter management? Like what are the best practices there?
Well, yeah, I for sure I'm not the expert to tell you the best practices, but I do know that it makes sense. First of all, you have to make it's an assumption, but it's not that far off. What percent of dry matter or what percent of total intake of that bird's life is actually litter, right? We know that it's more than 1%. Some people say perhaps as much as 5%. So somewhere in that range, maybe even a little higher, other people would argue. If that's the case, we have to think of litter differently. And managing that litter is through a probiotic means, I think, does make sense. I think that is actually the benefit of those broad spectrum bacillus, because once they get into that litter, they're still active molecules, they're still active producers of these antimicrobials, and they can start to impact the litter quality as well. And I think that's another benefit that companies that do use probiotics, particularly those that are bacillus-based, do see that benefit of litter environmental effects as well. And I think that's a good first step. Controlling water activity is such a critical thing. Remember, it's a narrow range of water activity where things like salmonella can survive. Water activity of salmonella needs to be about 0.94, 95 or higher. So if we just dry it out just a little, we start to see reduction in salmonella, therefore less whole, salmonella in that carcass. And so that's a huge thing as well.
Yeah. I am definitely not a microbiologist, but it just astounds me how hardy salmonella can be in other ways. And then just a little bit of dry air and it's like, peace out, I'm done.
That's the Achilles heel you have to target. And that's a great way to do it. Yep.
Yeah. It's unbelievable that the bird's immune system is cool with it. It's like, commensal, you're fine. But it's going to be a huge problem for the people that might consume the product.
And in the same way, really, Campylobacter, right? Campylobacter being pretty much a normal resident of most of the gastrointestinal tract. And also at a fairly high level. And again, a challenge for us, not necessarily the bird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the difficulties or the challenges or opportunities for.
It's definitely on the research idea side.
Yeah. So is there anything today that we haven't covered or just any points that you want to highlight?
No, I think the big message that I would have, and it's exciting because I'm the older guy now, all of a sudden this gray bearded look, okay, it's just who I am. So at age 64, I'm excited about the science and what we understand today about not only poultry science and gastrointestinal microbiome and how important it is, but how to develop that immune system, but how microbiology plays into that, and that how we can now stack technologies, find the best solution, and start looking at what makes sense for each stage of production. And I know for you who are, you said it, nutritionists don't want to make a change every 2 weeks. But at the same time, if there's a solution that we can get to really address the problem at the particular age or challenge, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, it makes the precision and the customization makes total sense.
Yep, for sure.
It's time for our famous 3. When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
Before we go today, I want to ask you the 3 questions that we ask all of our guests. And the first one is do you have a favorite poultry-related resource that you reference regularly?
Journal Poultry Science, for sure. Not just the U.S., there's the Asian, Australian one as well. Just reading across those, I was just pulled up an article at lunch and said, oh, look at that. It's another good one. The early gastrointestinal health and development immune system. That's wonderful. If you're a student, begin to read one. I always told my students, 1 paper a day, guys, because in a year, you'll be up to where the industry is. And in 5 years, you'll be at the lead. So that's what it takes.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite non-poultry related resource that you like to use regularly?
I look for things that kind of motivate us as a team, as a company, or if I'm working with other independent companies as either a board member or ever. Gary Hamel from Harvard Business Review writes great articles about innovation and teaches you that how to do innovation differently, because we all need to figure out ways to make new things and solve problems. And is one of the books that I'd love to tell people to read is Innovation to the Core. And that's for his background and his understanding of the best innovation models.
Yeah, no, that is a great reference for people to read if they're interested. The last question is, for somebody wanting to get into, any aspect of the poultry industry, how do they become successful? What's your best advice for success?
Well, I would argue, read that article and go to class, because I was a professor and you got to be in class. Sorry. And be ready to work hard. I mean, today, that's the magic. There is no magic. It's just about doing it day in, day out, right?
Yeah, I agree. I always tell my students, you got to go to class. So I feel with you on that one. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. This is always enlightening, and I love hearing about people's work and their life work and passions and fields outside of my own. I always learn something great.
All right. Well, thank you for the time, and great to meet you, Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you.